You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from Ivoxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt Get Outta Here Yeti, and alongside me is my co-host, Matt Cozzolino.
Something about a lamp.
Yes. In each episode, we dive into the wide range of technologies that make up this beautiful sandbox called IT that we all play in. We share our hopes and dreams, opinions both positive and critical alike, all with a touch of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all need a seat on that couch. So we have a very special guest for our 50th episode today, Mr. Keith Emmanuel. You might recognize him from a past episode, but it's been a little bit of a minute. So Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How's everyone else?
Not bad.
Pretty good.
Yeah, well, Keith is a self-proclaimed minimalist, and so it's tough to get him on because that means he has to have a chair to sit in and a desk to sit at and a microphone stand to Velcro his microphone to, but he's using one of those virtual backgrounds that have become so popular. And for a minimalist, he's got 8 lamps in that virtual scene. So I kind of wonder if that was to plan. Is this how you get things, Keith, virtually?
Yes, all of my possessions are virtual possessions.
There you go. They don't actually exist.
Yeah, it's all in VR.
There you go.
Eventually,
I was watching my beloved Sounders get trounced in MLS Cup final on Saturday, and we were just getting crushed. And I was reading one of the threads, the game discussion threads, and somebody's like, "Hey, last year they did so and so. Can I watch this in VR?" And I'm like, "You really want to watch this team crap the bed in virtual reality? Like how many senses do you want ruined tonight? This is not good." So the VR thing is. We had a little discussion at Tech Day yesterday about VR. Were you there for that, Keith?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I was. I think it'd be kind of cool. I'd like to actually give it a try. I haven't gotten into that one. It's one of those tech things I haven't gotten into.
Friend of mine had one. There was not that it's a huge problem, but you have an umbilical cord hanging off the back of your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make sure you don't spin around and get that all tightened up around you.
They're wireless adapters you can get for them.
We were talking about a little bit.
Everything.
Yeah, I think so much of the VR experience is fidelity, though, of what you're seeing, and that is both quality and latency. And I think wireless is a bottleneck in both ways for that in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I was looking at drone racing, first-person drone views, and they're just getting to the digital piece, and
Ooh.
it'll be laggy sometimes, and then some of the frames will just drop out because it's digital, and I'm like, I don't know, I could get behind that because it's really clear, really beautiful, but I don't know
those
if I want
not
to be on that
machines?
first. That's the other one is for me, I don't do 3D movies because it hurts. So I assume it'll be something similar. I don't know.
It's better than 3D movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot better than 3D movies.
Well,
3D movies will make me sick, but VR not so much.
it came out right around the time the Xbox One. So we're talking back in 2013 era. When it came out, I forget what they called it. They had a projector that they were developing that would basically scan the room with, I would assume, LiDAR or something similar. And then what it would do
You mean the
is
Kinect?
it would also then know where the TV is too and ignore that area. And then it would use, I believe they were laser projectors. And it would use the projector to essentially complement the surrounding area, walls, objects, anything. So if I've got this projector hanging from my ceiling above my couch at the back of the room, and it sees my coffee table, and it sees my couch and the walls and the brick wall around, and what it would do is it would kind of like where noise canceling would send pixels or send sound waves that cancel out what it's hearing. Similar to that, it would basically project in the room. It could project an object onto the table, not like a hologram or anything, but just 2D more or less. But it was basically an extensive immersion of an extension of what was on the television, right? So
augmented reality for your environment.
kind of a baby version of
Yeah.
that. And I always was very excited to see where that would go because I'm like, okay, instead of strapping something onto my head and really having to relearn how to show me and how my senses are going to absorb all of that information and not make me sick and all of this, because you can't run around in Call of Duty speeds believing that you're running that fast because it's like 45 miles an hour. You'd be puking within 15 minutes. So I always thought that was cool, and I do think that's the next level of entertainment. And I'm not like, when is the Oasis going to be possible, man, from Ready Player One? But baby steps to immersion, I think, is the next phase of personal home entertainment, right? I think.
Yeah.
I think it's fairly. I think it's fairly there already. Like if you get any of the VR games, it right now the main issue that you have is kind of dealing with the mechanics of moving around.
Because you can't walk.
Mainly because
right?
you're trapped in a box, and so it's figuring out how to kind of get the camera to wobble enough so that if you're walking around, you're always walking around in a circle, but you never really know.
Well, they have
Right.
that omnidirectional treadmill, which sounds funny, but I mean that is the solution. Is a surface that you can walk on, but you don't really necessarily go anywhere.
There was, I think, a Smarter
That
Everyday episode where he went and actually tried that one out. It's actually a real thing.
it reminds me almost of like Rock Band or Guitar Hero, like just like a big set piece that you're gonna need, and then in 5 years you're gonna forget.
Yeah.
Talk about immersion, man. I was a rock star every time I strapped on that axe.
I enjoyed that one. That was a fun one.
Yes.
Rock
Yeah.
Band, yeah.
So we are actually not here to talk about virtual reality and virtual guitar heroism. Unfortunately, that would be a fun one. We could do a video version where we kind of face off in Guitar Hero. But the reason why we have Keith on, in many reasons, but the main reason is we are in the midst of registration being open for his hands-on network automation with Ansible class. That class runs from January 19th to the 21st. So we're just coming up on about a month away, but it is our next class in our iBoxy Lab series and taught by our very own Keith Emmanuel. So we wanted to bring him on to chat about that and then dive into some of the bits that go towards that class as well as the lab at large and towards DevOps at large ultimately, which is just that word that is, there's so much to say about it and there's so many reasons to be scared of it, at least for me too. It can mean so many things, so loaded. So yeah, Keith, tell us about this, a little bit about the class if you would.
So the class is so it's hands-on network automation for Ansible, and it's a class about Ansible designed for network engineers. So if you're systems admin, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait for a different class. But what we're trying to solve here is we're trying to get the networking community on board with automation and taking advantage of a lot of the advances in technology in terms of making your job easier, making your job more consistent, reducing errors, and taking you as a human out of the loop. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning about Ansible. We're also going to be learning about the various other technologies that you're going to have to use with Ansible, such as like YAML, JSON, Jinja2, and Git.
Yeah. I imagine
Yeah.
being being a sysadmin, a lot of the structure and how you'd work with that's the same. So what do you do that you'd see as different in a network stack? Like what kind of things are you automating in the network world?
Well, for the most part, you're automating configuration. Maybe you're automating your methods of procedure or your standard operating procedures. Maybe you're automating how you upgrade the devices. But the main difference is that with networking devices, they don't really have, they're more like embedded systems, and you can't really install anything that you want on them willy-nilly.
There's not like an environment that you operate in.
You don't go pip install or git apt install or something.
most of the big name brands, they don't allow that. Some of the smaller ones do. They have more of an open environment, but yeah, you can't just install a random package or build something from source and then install that on a piece of software or on a networking device. So yeah, so what's nice about Ansible is that you run it from your laptop or from a centralized command and control server, and it just uses SSH to push your automation commands to whatever network devices you want, and you tell it what to do, and it does it.
So that's been something that's kind of not. It's given me pause at a very early step. Okay, let's jump in and do this, and it's tied to our lab too in terms of, okay, I'm going to write a Terraform state file to do this or build this, or an Ansible YAML file, and it is, hey, log into your laptop, make sure you have the right binaries. Here's the configuration file. Go run this, and it'll go out and do it. Well, what happens when I got to hand it off to my buddy Matt or Keith to do it as well? And so that the centralized location for not only the configuration, but is a staging server desirable? Is a staging server more important, or is the repository of the actual configuration more important, or are they both equally important? So where I launch it from and where I store my configs. And I think you know where I'm going with where we store the configs, because we're going to be talking about it this episode. But from where's your launch point for running these? Is there a management server that we all have to log into, or can we all kind of do it from our own workstations?
So you can do it from your own workstations. I worked in environments where everyone was running these automation scripts from their own workstations, but you can also centralize it as well with tools like Ansible AWX or Ansible Tower, which is a centralized solution, and then it gives you things like a GUI dashboard.
That just makes me feel better. Really. The central jumping off point. I don't know if that's right. It just does. Maybe I'm old-fashioned.
I'm more of a decentralized person, so I like the robustness. If something goes down, you still have got 3 more other things that can also take its place.
All you have to do is pull that repo down and run it again, right?
Yeah, but going to repos, if you have 5 different users all trying to run the same set of tools or the same programs, you want to make sure that they're running the same code. And so it's really important that you're using some sort of source code management in order to kind of sync all of the files that they have between each other. You want to use something like Git or Mercurial or SVN or CVS, just something that keeps track of the files, rather than having like a shared folder or a shared network drive, and then having different folders based off of dates and timestamps. It's just a lot easier to keep it on a program that's just designed to snapshot code.
So we buried the lead a little bit. Our main topic really that we're going to talk about is Git and source code management, more generically, and how we use it. So yeah, good point, Keith. So in terms of, you mentioned Mercurial and CVS and SVN. SVN being Subversion, is that right?
Yes.
That I use Subversion for a website that I continue to run, but started back in 2001. And way back then, I was told by one of the developers of the code base that I was working with, my buddy Sean up in Vancouver, hey, dude, get this Subversion thing. I mean, you check out file. It was more of a, I don't think everybody uses Git now. It seems like Git, the protocol, is the way forward. Fine, but back then, it really wasn't about a repository, and it was more about check in, check out, or at least that's how we used it. So if both of us were working on something, and I tried to check a file out, it would say, hey, somebody's got this thing locked already. You can't grab this file. And we've come a long way since then.
Yes, we have. So I think Subversion is an example of one of the centralized source code management systems, as opposed to Git, which is decentralized. So with Git, anyone can pull any file from any other person, right? With a centralized system, you're always checking in and out of the main server, and what it was doing with you in terms of like locking the files is just making sure that you're not going to have a merge conflict. That's
So we're looking at stuff like how does it handle merge as some of the differences between those two apps, because I know we've done multiple versions, and I work on a section of a file and Yeti works on a section of a file, and then we both upload and it shows us the delta, shows us the differences, and we say, hey, you know what, I was working in a completely different section than he was, so it should be fine to merge these two files together. Is that kind of an appropriate assessment of one of the differences at least?
Yeah, it'll do that, and if it doesn't reconcile, if it's not able to reconcile the differences, it'll tell you, hey, fix this, and that file is going to be broken until you fix it. So
it blows my mind. I'm shaking my head, and I'm not shaking my head at you, Keith. So my experience, and that's how I can speak to it in terms of I'm not here to pitch a website, but in my 20s, late high school, early college, big, huge Dave Matthews Band fan. Have been historically a Dave Matthews Band fan most of my adult life. Not, don't go to many concerts anymore, especially not this year, but, whatever. But this website is huge, and I've held it up for 2 decades now almost. And so a lot of my technology, my hobbies that I do kind of tie along with the website. Not because at this point in my life that I'm a huge fan anymore, but hey, if I want to write an iOS app, it's not, hey, what kind of app should I write? No, I'll write a companion app that allows you to stream live concerts. Like, it lets me scratch the tech itch, but gives me a use case for it, and not just some proof of concept that nobody's ever going to download. It helped me learn server administration and how to balance heavy loads and high traffic and all of that. So I've been able to do a lot of fun tech hosting stuff because of this website. And one thing that I've toyed with, I run a GitLab server that's got my source code for my iOS app, and all that really does is I use branches, I use versions, but I am totally the bull in the china shop. Like, yes, I'm quote unquote using Git to be my backend source repository, but it's little more than a glorified file system with a couple of branches. So and it's nobody's fault but my own. Clearly, this thing's powerful, but I am blown away by the idea of multiple teams with multiple members each writing code, and then all of a sudden you commit. And what I get terrified about is how do you un-F from something? You get commits pushed where it's all these breaking changes, but let's say multiple people have committed and you've merged multiple things, and then how do you unknot that mess? That challenges me, that concept.
So when you're working in a team, what's also going to be important is kind of how you structure the branches in of themselves. So one thing you're probably gonna have like 3 branches at minimum, or 3 types of branches at minimum. One is going to be your production branch, where anything that's actually running in production is going to be promoted to that. You're also going to have a development branch, which any feature that you're working on, bug fixes, things like that, will be committed to. And then you're going to have a feature branch for like different improvements that you'll want to make to your program. And so typically how it works, at least with me, the name of this model is called GitFlow. And there's I can try to look up the website that I was using to learn it.
GitFlow?
GitFlow.
Okay.
So it's more like a methodology for how to how to structure your
No, that's smart. I mean, so many of us jump in without reading the manual, right? And it's like, yes, I can get it up and running. And yes, I'm using it. Am I using it correctly? Yeah, that's important. RTFM, and yeah, I'm guilty.
That's exactly what I've been looking for, yeah.
So I found the article that I was referencing, and so it's like from 2010, so it's pretty old, but I find it useful.
If conceptually it's the same, then yeah. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that, Keith, with us later, we'll make sure to put that up in the episode notes on the site here. Yeah.
All right. So it's nvie.com, a successful Git branching model, and what you're essentially doing is you have a main development branch that you're going to be working off of, and then anytime that you're actually ready to commit something to production, you'll just create a new branch or merge the existing changes that you have to the master branch, and then just go back to work on your development branch.
And for a website, at that point, you'd commit it to the branch, but then you'd go to your prod directory or wherever your prod app lives, and you would pull down that branch at that point.
Yeah, that's
that'd
the pull
be that's your actual deployment, your cutover.
It could be that. You could do it with an Ansible script. If you were doing like Ruby on Rails, it could be like Capistrano, or maybe it could be like Heroku.
I feel very exotic and world traveled with all these names. Like I feel like I'm on a tour of the world.
It depends on how you're hosting the software. Like if it's just like a static page or like a simple PHP thing, you could probably just get away with.
What's wrong with PHP?
Nothing. I wrote a bunch of stuff in PHP.
Did I?
You mean you don't love global variables?
I love global variables. Global variables are the best.
Me too. That's why they've deprecated them about 5 versions ago, and I keep overriding it. No, you'll break my whole site.
No. Like if you do game development or anything like that, global variables are it's a bad practice for like object-oriented programming, but it's generally generally nice for like something like a game where state is shared between a lot of different objects. So
it's crazy that we're talking about so many software development principles right now, and we're actually talking about it in the context of networking. And so when I heard that you were undertaking this, Keith, and this was, I don't know, a year plus ago, when we were talking about this kind of thing that I knew that you were into, and not to be skeptical, but I'm like, really? I mean, from a network standpoint, what am I automating? And again, color me ignorant in this, but I was a network engineer in a smaller place, and it was mostly we had projects and then we didn't for networking in a lot of the ways in what we did. So in terms of automating, what are some common things that you might want to automate from a network standpoint? Is it deploying VLANs? Is it standard templates, code upgrades?
So all of the above. So let's take the whole SolarWinds thing that just happened. So SolarWinds just got hacked, and so maybe you're a little bit gun shy about continuing to use it, and so now you're doing a POC on a new network monitoring system, and you need to get all of your network gear to point to that instead of SolarWinds. Well, you just have a whole bunch of devices that you need to update from yesterday and get SolarWinds off of them and pointing to this new system. Well, I can create an Ansible script that does that, and now I don't have to go into each and every box and copy paste.
Or you could stand up a specific SNMP string crossing.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's
or
and
here's
rotate the other ones out.
Here's my common config for a desktop with a VoIP phone and a workstation on it, and make sure that everything's consistent that way. So it's consistency is the name of the game, right?
Yes. I like it for .1x deployments.
Sure.
Anything that seems extremely tedious, labor intensive, or anything that frequently comes up in a quarterly cycle. So maybe it's like a password rotation, that sort of thing, or a compliance check to make sure that you don't have public SNMP strings on any of the devices.
Do you have, you said .10, do you have a toolbox that you carry around with you when you're going to go do a network install for a customer, and you've got this new stack of Nexus switching, and you're like, here, let me just bounce my Ansible stuff against it, and I'm done?
So I have it's going to depend on the project. So So usually what happens is if the project happens to have like more than 6 sites that I'm going to be visiting, I'll usually create a template for those sites because the design will be fairly regular. But oftentimes you're dealing with an organic environment, and they can't really go into something that's incredibly standardized
Yet.
relatively easily.
Yeah.
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 So there's a lot of cruft that they're going to need to clean up. So I'll use the automation to kind of get a skeleton in place for my base configs, and then review them, and then add any deltas that I need to by hand.
Okay.
But like for base configurations, specifying NTP servers, login banners, users, all of that stuff. Just hit it with an Ansible script, and then I just really need to worry about the meat and potatoes, the logic of like routing back and forth, that sort of stuff, rather than making sure that I copy pasted every single bit on every single device.
I feel like a bunch of that would be maybe a little easier for that to happen in a network environment. Like I've got this desire, this want to be able to, here, let me show up with my laptop and plug in, and let me just run this script to deploy all of this base NSX components. But that feels so much more daunting because I'm moving larger chunks of data, I'm pushing code around. Do you do things when you're doing that kind of a deployment? Do you do things with like bootstrapping and making sure everything's on a consistent OS and at that level, or is it bring the system up and make sure it's got a login and you're hitting it via the console? How do you get that initial connection to a device?
I know Matt's huge about not that initial work being automated. You want to just plug it in and have it be done. So it's a good question.
I'd love to, but ugh.
Well, so that's something that I'm trying to figure out now. And so it's looking, for me, what it's looking like is a TFTP server of some sort. So I've got a little I've got a NUC and a Raspberry Pi that I'm playing with, and I'm trying to get set up. But what that will end up looking like is, me bringing that at a job site, connecting all of these network devices on a switch, and on a separate switch, like my own little management switch, and having them just kind of boot up off of that to a particular image. And so what I can do is I can use an Ansible script in order to template out the configurations that each of the devices would need. And then from the TFTP server, they'll download the configurations and also download the OS that they need in order to get online.
So you're not necessarily booting them up and then going and talking to each device to build, to do the config. You're building a template config that it's loading and importing? Because like Cisco devices are all text files. So
you can do it both ways, but it depends on so one of the issues with automation, especially on the network front, is making sure that you don't cut your legs out from under you, right? And so you want to do because
let me work on the VPN automating while I'm connected via the VPN.
Yeah, let me work on my car while it's running, and I'm running 60 miles an hour. So like if you're automating something with routing, and then you remove it, like the automation removes the routing stanzas for like OSPF or EIGRP or something, and then reapplies them because that's part of the process, well then you're kind of out of luck. So it's you have to be mindful in terms of the steps that you're using to the order of operations of how you're manipulating the environment in order to get it to conform to how you want.
Right. So a lot of the same.
That's something we ran into with Terraform, right, Matt? Like depends upon and spinning up things that need to exist, and
trying to get a bunch of that working. I think the big difference there is Terraform's already got the management infrastructure in place, so none of the things we were touching with it pulled the management address off of the management servers for NSX, right? It was right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, Keith, is so within the lab we're using hosted GitLab in your class. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's an on-prem version of GitLab.
Cool. I run it myself, an open source version, and I've found it pretty powerful. The only reason I spun it up is because I don't want to make my app open source. Just for whatever reason, I didn't want. I'm a single independent developer. I just don't. I'd rather just keep it private. Let's just leave it at that kind of thing. It's just nothing I want to expose to the world. Have them pick away and attack my quality of code. So at the time, GitHub was not owned by Microsoft, and in order to get a private repo, you needed to pay like $10 a month or something like that. And it's like, if I can host it myself, which I have the infrastructure for it, I'll do it myself. So GitLab entered into my environment. So that's why I use GitLab for my source control. But now, since then, you can actually have free private repos at GitHub also. But so GitLab is so we didn't have to depend on the internet and individual accounts being set up. I'm guessing for ease of provisioning in the class, Keith.
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons, and just to kind of streamline it. So what I wanted to do was just pre-provision as much as I could, and that was my way, my solution for that. So they can work on what they need to, and the nice thing about Git is you can also specify multiple upstream servers. So if you do open up a GitLab account or a GitHub account, or you have your own private GitLab server at home, what you could do is specify another upstream server and commit and push to both of those simultaneously.
So you can keep it in multiple
I'm gonna
locations.
have to pull you. I'm gonna pick your brain on the side too. But things like CI/CD are things that I wanna use the tool and to help myself. I don't want to use it just to be like, oh, I'm nerdy and I'm using it, and it's offering me absolutely nothing except another thing that I've learned for no tangible benefit. The CI/CD stuff is where it's really further automating all the parts in deployment. I'm guessing in terms of that dev feature and master branch concept, CI/CD would essentially be this is how I go through, and it runs testing metrics as well, and then if it passes, it will push it to prod for me.
Yeah, so if we break that down, CI/CD being continuous integration, continuous development, right? And so anytime you check something into your SCM, what you're relying on the continuous integration to do is integrate the code. So building it, if it's a language that compiles like C++, or Go or something like that. And then, so that's one test that you're probably going to want to do. Does it work? Okay. And
does it compile?
Yes. And depending on how big the project is, that could be compilation can be fairly quick, or it can take a long time. So just finding out whether or not you foobarred something relatively early in the process before you keep writing code, I think is a little bit important. And then after you build the code, you're going to probably want to run some sort of tests to make sure that it does what you think it does. Usually, me personally, I'm not that good at writing tests. The only time that I happen to write tests is when I'm touching old code. And so, I don't like changing things without knowing that it worked before. So I'll write a test to make sure it worked before, change it, and then if it still works after, if the test still works after I'm done with my changes, then I'm feeling pretty good. So that's usually how I go about testing. But a lot of other people or developers are probably more proactive about testing everything that they create.
I think it comes with a level of comfort too with the workflow process. Once you get to the point where that's what you're embedded in and steeped in, you can trust that automated process. For me, the idea of all of those things being automated, I just know that I have to touch every single thing to tweak this almost every time, at least at this stage.
Daunting.
Once you wear that path, I think it becomes a lot more of a comfortable operation to undertake. Yeah.
Yeah, but how many? If you're always tweaking the same little bits every time, that's you want to automate that.
Yeah.
Right. If you're doing the same thing every time, that could just be rolled into one script that does the thing for you, and then you don't have to keep that in your your brain cache. You just offload that.
I think that's the great thing about the internet, and a lot of the stuff I touch is I don't try to remember how exactly this works, but I know where to go find the answer. How do I go look up the documentation to do that, right?
Yeah, for me, what's important is kind of so in a similar vein, it's just kind of the mechanics. You at some point you kind of have to do the work and go through the motions of writing the scripts, figuring out how it works. But then after you do it a few times, that's not something that you need to keep in your head.
Right.
You've proved it. You've done it.
I can trust this to do the thing that it's going to do, that I've set it up to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like that.
Well, cool. Well, so we are nearly a month away, or almost a month away from the class. As we mentioned, the registration is open. So you can do that by, if you've got an account manager already, you're an Ivoxy customer, you can reach out to them, or you can go to ivoxy.com/Ansible, and that will give you all the deets. Let me go there right now and see what that looks like, because that is a pretty looking URL.
Looking it up live.
ivoxy.com/Ansible. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Our marketing team is awesome. So they put it all there. What you'll learn, you'll dive into general Ansible usage, tracking changes with Git, as Keith was saying, YAML and JSON markup languages, Jinja 2, which I have no experience with, so that's cool. And then Ansible networking modules to manipulate Cisco iOS and Nexus OS devices. So that's cool. And then all the awesome labs, they're going to be a part of that as well. And of course, the highlight of it all, instructed by Keith, our very own Keith Emmanuel. So CCIE certified. I mean, a lot of experience with Cisco networks, with networking in general, and obviously the automation stuff. Keith, man, thank you so much for finding that Velcro to strap your microphone to and joining us this morning.
Can we get a nice rip from it?
No, that's going to drop the mic.
Oh, that's
If you want a mic drop, I can do that.
That's risky.
There we go.
You want to merge that to prod branch, Kaz, and we haven't even tested it.
I'm putting the engineer back to network engineer.
Oh, cool. All right, well, everybody, thanks for listening to Data Center Therapy. If you've got questions, email us at podcast@ivoxy.com. Would love to chat about any topic you might want to hear about. And again, to register or learn more about Keith's hands-on network automation with Ansible class starting January 19th, head to ivoxy.com/Ansible. Mr. Kozlino, Mr. Emmanuel, thanks for joining us. Good to chat with you two.
Thank you, guys. It was fun.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
Have a good one, everyone.